F01, sending. I counted to 5, and when nothing came back, I scrubbed a line through it. No contact. F02, sending. I sent the packet, counted to 5. When nothing came back, I scrubbed a line through it. No contact. F03. If this sounds like tedious work to you, then that's because it is. I've spent the better part of 5 years getting my degree in things like string theory and space anomalies, but those kinds of degrees require money. That money has to come from somewhere, and in my case, that somewhere was a job at a scientific research lab. When I wasn't working on my doctorate, of course. I mostly worked on the weekends, doing different things that fell under the heading of my field of study, but a lot of the work came with NDAs and contracts stating how I would never speak of anything I worked on outside the facility, or to anyone without similar clearance inside the facility, for that matter. I could probably get in a lot of trouble for talking about what I'm about to talk about, but I think it needs to be told. You guys need to know what's going on, because it could potentially affect everyone on this planet. For the last 6 months, I've been involved in something called the Bottle Project. The Bottle Project is, as its name implies, about sending messages out to try to get a response. Messages to who, you might ask? Well, messages to other life forms outside of our dimension. The research facility that I work at has a machine. It's a machine that I don't understand, and it's a machine that I don't ask a lot of questions about. What it amounts to is a big metal hatch with an apparatus similar to an iron lung connected to the wall. When you use the machine, you send a message through the iron lung and into the hatch. The messages are sent in a similar fashion to phone calls. It was decided that if whoever was receiving the messages was on a technological level like ours, then they should be able to encounter and decipher something on the basis of a sound call and return a similar message. Your next question will undoubtedly be, well, who are we sending these messages to? And the answer to that might surprise you. I'd been working here for a couple of weeks before I found out myself. Most people are tight-lipped about it, but I had found common ground with my then manager and got some answers out of him in a very unscientific way. We went out for drinks one night after work, and I asked him who we were sending all these voicemails to. He laughed, and he told me that at the start of the project, they were sending them into space, deep space. We were hoping to get messages back from helpful aliens who might tell us how to go to the stars or how to advance our civilization. What we got was a bunch of dead air for the next 20-some-odd years. Turns out, nobody was in a big hurry to help us. They either aren't there or they don't care, and it amounts to the same thing. So that's when one of the old heads, Dr. Klein, had a great idea to invent that machine that you sit about 5 feet away from every day. He decided that maybe the answer wasn't in another species, but in our own. I asked him what he meant, and he glanced around like he was looking for eavesdroppers before he went on. I shouldn't be telling you this. No one is supposed to know this without some pretty heavy clearance. But that machine sends messages to other dimensions. I thought he was pulling my leg for a minute, having a little fun with the new guy, but he assured me that he was 100% on the level. I know what it sounds like. I didn't believe it myself when they first told me. But I swear, it's the truth. Dr. Klein decided that there had to be a dimension out there where we had figured out faster than light travel. He decided that if we could send messages to one of those universes, then maybe they would help us out. That was 2010, and we've been sending those messages in a bottle ever since. I asked him if he'd ever gotten a response, and he gave me this look that was equal parts pity and amusement. How long you been working on the project? I told him about a month. How many messages have you received? I told him none. The letter in front of the dimension should tell you how many times we've done this. Each collective is given an alphabet letter, and each letter has about 99 confirmed locations. I believe you're up to D now, and to my knowledge, we've only received about 5 responses in the whole life of the project. I asked him about those responses, but not even the liquor could make him talk about those. You're a good kid, but if I told you, you'd probably quit tomorrow. Those messages... He got a faraway look before taking another drink. They're the kind of thing that you have to experience for yourself. That had excited me a little bit. I really wanted to get a response, so I kept sending my messages out into the universe, waiting for the day when I might get my own response back. What could these other places tell us? What knowledge could they share, and what secrets might they help us uncover? It was pretty exciting. At least it was then. That had been 6 months ago, and I'd been plodding along through the alphabet ever since. Every now and again I would get something, and that was the kind of thing that kept me going. Every now and again I would get static or a weird tone, and per protocol I would log it and send it to my supervisor. If they actually learned anything from them, they never said. They always just thanked me and told me to keep at it. I kept at it, but I never felt like I was getting anywhere. That's how I came to be sitting at my desk at 23:45 on a Saturday. That's how I came to be at my station when I got my first response. F04, sending. I was counting, about to scrub through and move on, when I heard something on the other end. It was weak, like a voice heard over the radio, but it was the most that I had ever heard, and it filled me with a sense of excitement and dread. I picked up the microphone, something I had never done before, and spoke into it haltingly. Hello? Can you read me? More static, some garbled words, and then it seemed to clear up, as if they were adjusting instruments on their end. Hello? Hello! This is Eden Listening Station in the Sol system, Earth. Who am I speaking with? It was my turn to go silent for a moment. That was English. Not just a human voice, but an English-speaking voice as well. I had been told that if I got a message back, it might not be in a language that I understood. I'd been told it might not be understandable at all, that it might even make me sick or make my head hurt. To get a message that sounded like it could be from someone no farther away than the next office over was amazing. Hello? Are you still there? I keyed up the mic, not wanting to lose them because of a misunderstanding. Yeah, sorry. You surprised me. This is Post M at the Medici Labs, a subsidiary of the United States government. I tried to think of what to say. Am I speaking with someone from a different dimension? The voice on the other end sounded amused. I could ask you the same question. We had assumed this transmission was from deep space, but I suppose it would be more advantageous if it was from another dimension entirely. Are you from Earth? My hands shook as I remembered to turn on the recorder. My bosses would have been pretty upset if I had made contact and forgotten to record the exchange in my surprise. Yes. This is Earth. This is specifically the United States of America. The year is 2022, and the president is Joseph Biden. The voice on the other end laughed again, but seemed to think that it might be rude as it ended quickly. Sorry, but we don't have presidents anymore, so such an antiquated term seems a little silly. It's good to hear that you're from Earth. We haven't called ourselves the United States in over 100 years. We're now the Eden Collective of Nations. That was amazing. I'd never guessed that something like this could happen. I was dumbstruck for a moment as I tried to decide how to continue. The person on the other end of the transmission, however, didn't seem to have any such hang-ups. I wonder, what is the purpose of your contacting us, if I might ask? I believe we're seeking to share technology and ideas, I hedged, wondering how much I was supposed to share with the voice on the radio. I believe my supervisors are hoping to find a means of faster-than-light travel. "Oh, is that all?" the voice said, almost laughing. "Well, perhaps we can help each other out. I'd love to speak more on the matter, but I do believe I am below the rank to do so. Is there someone you might put me through to, a supervisor or some such thing, so that we may continue this on a more official channel?" I told him that that's probably what my supervisor would want as well, and asked if they would hold while I made contact with the higher-ups. The next few weeks were extremely hectic. I was given a bonus and told to take a couple of weeks off for some well-earned rest. People shook my hand and told me that I'd done a great service to my country, but I just felt like I'd been doing my job. I'd really just been sending messages out without any hope of getting anything back, but it was hard to forget the voice on the other end as I sat for a couple of days and tried to keep it to myself. The voice had sounded familiar, even like somebody that I might know, but it had also sounded like one of those old radio broadcasts from the World War times. The newsreel stuff. The accent had definitely been American, but it had been laced with a strange underlay of British and maybe something else. I told myself it wasn't so hard to believe. If there had been a coalition of nations, then the English language would probably have been pretty mixed up. Still, it was hard to shake the World War II similarities in my head. The voice had sounded like it wanted to offer me war bonds or something, and, well, I'd expected to come back after a couple of days and maybe get to talk to them again. That wasn't going to happen, though. F04 had been reclassified as a high priority, and communication with them was on a strictly need-to-know basis. I was told to return to my workstation and continue to send messages into the void, but there was a new addition to my desk. There was a little black box with a flashing light on it, a label maker stamp declaring it to be the line to F04, in case of direct communication. If it rang, I was to pick it up immediately and send it to whoever was on the other end upstairs. My hours had been changed to reflect a small promotion. I had now been placed on the 3 to 11 shift, something that would fit in much better with my college hours. I had been on midnights before that, and it had been hard to adjust to a midday sleep schedule while still maintaining my schoolwork. Now I could come in after my last class and get to bed before daylight. All in all, it was a pretty good system. And so, I got back to work, started hunting for another signal. I started sending out messages to the rest of F. Whoever had been doing it while I was away was up to F89, and I fell back into the general expectation of short bursts of static or nothing at all. I kept hoping for another voice on the other end, but as the first shift went on, I began to wonder if I'd ever find another return message. It was about 9:30, and I'd been thinking about getting off soon, when suddenly, the F4 phone began to chirp. My current supervisor was very different from the red-faced man I'd drunk with. He had said that if it had happened, I was to pick it up immediately and transfer it upstairs. I picked it up, preparing to send the call to the higher-ups, but before I could tell them to hold on and that I was transferring them, I heard something strange on the other end. There was no plummy war bond salesman on the end of this call, and what I heard got my neck hairs up a bit. It was mechanical, though the voice was human enough to make me wonder. The cadence, however, was too perfect to be anything but a machine. But who could really say? Boots, 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 moving up and down again. There's no discharge in the war. Hello? I said, thinking perhaps I'd crossed the signal somewhere. Just a minute while I transfer you upstairs. If there was actually someone on the other end, they didn't say anything. They just kept repeating whatever it was they were reading from. Don't. Look at what's in front of you. I asked again if they needed something, but they just kept right on, going on with the poem or message or whatever it was. The cadence made it sound like a military march, something that Marines might step to as they went about their physical training. And again, the hairs on the back of my neck lifted up. I'd heard it before. It was something old that I couldn't place. And as I listened, it went on. Men go mad with watching them. Boots, moving up and down again. There's no discharge in the war. Then, just as suddenly as it started, it began again from the beginning. I didn't ask if anybody was on the line. I just transferred it upstairs as I sat for the next hour and a half with a sense of cold dread wafting through me. I didn't know what I had just heard, but it didn't seem to be from the same as first contact. This hadn't been a person like the one that I'd first spoken to. This had been different. When I went home at the end of my shift, I really hoped I would leave that message behind. It was just a weird occurrence, and I was too tired after work and school to give it much thought. I fell into bed with the marching tune still buzzing around my head, assuming it would fizzle on its own. I should have known better, but a man can hope. I dreamed those words again and again that night. By the time I woke up the next morning, I thought I might be a little mad myself. I had an email from my boss when I got to work that night. He thanked me for transferring the message from F4 the night before, but reminded me that I was to transfer such messages right away. He said that there was 10 seconds of the call that couldn't be accounted for, and wanted a report on what I had heard before I transferred it. Again, I would like to remind you that all transmissions from that particular dimension are to be sent directly upstairs in the future. Your continued assistance in this matter is appreciated. I felt adequately chastised, but tried not to let it bring me down. I got back to work, sending messages into the void and never getting an answer. I tried not to think about it, but it was hard not to remember the way the message had sounded. It had been human, of that I was certain, but it sounded hopeless was the best I could come up with. The voice sounded beaten down, devoid of any real emotion at all, and I wondered what kind of conditions could breed a voice like that. Also, who would have called us just to leave a cryptic message like that? It was a mystery, to be sure, and the more I thought about it, the more curious I became. After that first call, I received a call nightly from the strange poem reader. I always sent them up immediately after that, but it was hard not to hear the beginning of that cadence and get a sense of dread all over again. I got curious about the poem, too. I knew I had heard it somewhere, but I couldn't place it. It sounded military in origin, but I'd never been in the military, and I only knew a couple of people who had. The people I asked just shook their heads and said it sounded familiar, but they also couldn't place it. I started dreaming about it after that first night, and it was affecting the way I slept. It also made me wonder more about F4 and why they would feel so inclined to send out a warning or a message or whatever it was. I decided to do a little bit of snooping, just enough to satiate my appetite. My boss hadn't left, he had just been promoted, so I felt like he might be able to give me some information, if correctly applied. We'll call him Mark for the sake of the story. Mark and I hung out every now and again. We ran in similar circles, after all. And when I invited him out for drinks one evening, it didn't seem that weird. Mark was leading a different department now, and we didn't see as much of each other as we used to around the office. Eventually, the conversation turned towards my discovery. I was glad he had steered it in that direction. It would have looked bad if I'd done it myself. It wouldn't have felt like I was doing something right. It would have felt like I was leading him into a trap. "It's not every day that you make first contact," he said jokingly. "True," I said as I took a sip of Dutch courage, "but I'd give a week's pay to know what they've been talking about with the supervisors. I think about it sometimes, you know, the voice of the man on the other end, and I wonder what they're like." My old boss snorted as he took another drink. Well, I can assure you, you're not missing out on much. Oh? Have they said anything interesting? Mark looked around as if he were worried that he might be under surveillance. And when he continued, he put his face very close to mine, as if sharing some great secret. Whoever it is on the other side of that machine, they're very interested in us. They don't talk about themselves much. They're mostly interested in our technology. The thing they talk about... He looked around again before going on. Some of those things are quite astounding. Interested in us? Why would they be interested in us? We're the ones who need help escaping our planet. How much could we give them? Well, I'll tell you, but you gotta keep it to yourself. This is pretty hush-hush stuff. I don't think they'd like it if they knew I was talking to you about it, but you're the one that found them, so maybe they'd understand. He took another conspiratorial look around, and when he was certain that we weren't being eavesdropped on, he went on. They seem to be interested in our military. Most of their questions have been about the state of our weapons. They want to know what we're capable of and whether we can help them enhance their own technology when it comes to warfare. I wanted to tell him that didn't make any sense, but in a way, I suppose it did. Hadn't I thought that the voice on the other end sounded like it was going to start selling me war bonds? All my mental analogies had pointed back to the World War II propaganda videos. So perhaps we had stumbled across a civilization that was at war with something they couldn't handle. I remembered again what they had called themselves, the Eden Coalition, and wondered what they could be fighting if everyone had decided to band together. What terrible thing could be in store for us if such enemies came to Earth? Have they offered to share anything with us? Oh, yes. They want to show us how to use the device to bring people to the other dimension. That sent my neck hair up. Really? Absolutely. They want to meet us and see what can be brought across from our world to theirs. He didn't bring it up again after that, and I suspect that he realized he'd said too much. We talked a little bit more, but he seemed distant for most of the conversation. The look on his face made me think that he might be contemplating whether what he told me was too much, and maybe what his bosses would make of it if they found out. The next day there was an email about not sharing sensitive information with those who didn't have the proper clearance. My old boss was never heard from again after that. Nothing was ever said to me, but the message was clear. The phone calls continued every night at 9:30 p.m., but now I just transferred them right away. The phrase, boots, 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 was all I ever caught before I sent it to the higher-ups. Starting to go a little crazy myself as the repetition burrowed into my subconscious. I'd find myself repeating it sometimes over and over again as I worked, but I was always careful not to let anyone hear me. They'd ghosted my old boss over loose talk. If they knew that I'd heard and was now repeating it to myself, then what would they do to me? Then one night, something different happened. It had been about a month since Mark had disappeared, and the buzz was that something big was happening. The guys upstairs had been working on something hush-hush, but the more secret the project, the more likely the bleed-out is. They had been up to look at the machine I was using to send messages, but they didn't say much. All I'd caught was a question that had been shushed quickly. A question about sending living things through the portal. Living things. They couldn't possibly be planning something like that. Could they? That night, same as the night before, the phone rang for F4. I picked it up, meaning to transfer it, but when the voice didn't immediately start yelling about boots, I stopped. It was a long pause, a sound like a breath being drawn in. and as I started to say hello, I heard a loud bang on the other end as someone began to shout. It was loud, making me pull my ear away from the phone, and as they began to yell out more of the chant, I nearly dropped it on the floor. Try to think of something different. Oh my God, keep me from going lunatic. Boots, moving up and down again. There's no discharge in the... It was cut off abruptly after that. It was replaced by a loud static sound before one of those not English voices said hello from the other end. I was silent, trying not to move or speak, and that seemed to make the voice even angrier. Hello? Who is this? Who do you work for? We will find you. No one gets away with spying on the Eden... But I hung up on him then. I didn't send any more messages after that. I just grabbed my bag and left early. I was officially done with the night, and I didn't care what they thought about it. I was sure that they would pull me over with every mile I rolled, but when I pulled up at my house without being grabbed by people in a white van, I thought I might have gotten away scot-free. I tried to sleep, but the words of the marching chant ran through my head over and over again. Boots. What did it mean? Moving up and down again. Why did they keep sending it? Men go mad from watching them. What were they trying to tell me? If your eyes drop. I put my head under my pillow, but it was almost like I could hear the sound of them marching in my ears. They will get atop of you. I looked at my phone when it started to ring, peeking at it as it buzzed ominously. Try. There's only one person that could be calling me this late at night to think of something different. They'd found me missing and were looking for me. Worse, they knew I'd listened to the phone call. What would they do to me? This was a government contract. I could be arrested for treason, sent to Leavenworth, or just vanished like my old boss. They had my address. They could just come get me. Oh my God, keep. I reached for the phone with shaky hands, knowing it wouldn't make any difference, whether I picked it up or not. Me from going lunatic. Hello, I said, wetting my lips. Mr. Starn, it's Medici Labs. We need you to come back to the facility. Something's come up, and we need to speak with you urgently. Boots. I shook my head, trying to squash the chant. Very well, let me get dressed, and I'll be on my way, and there's a car waiting outside for you. It's a black town car. It'll be parked on the curve. Please hurry, Mr. Starn. Dr. Klein is very interested to speak with you. I hung up the phone, shaking a little as I got dressed. I'm writing this down before they take me. I don't know if I'll ever come back again, but I know I can't listen to that voice chant about boots anymore. Whatever's going on in that universe, whatever the Eden Coalition is doing, it isn't good. I pray I come back from this, but I fear I might find out firsthand what those marching boots look like. Perhaps that's where they've been sending the people they disappear. Perhaps I'll find out for myself what it's like in F-04.